What does evil look like? In our world, in film and TV, it is easy to determine, in many cases, who the monster is. Many movies will have the villain wearing a mask or show us a maniacal expression, red glowing eyes or twirling a mustache. In comic books, the villain will have a unique and distinct feature, like sunken eyes, as one example. Clean and very hard to miss by design. But in the real world, how can you pick the monster from the crowd? Well kept, clean shaven, a nice business suit, perhaps? Kind and gentle to almost everyone they meet in public, but behind closed doors, who are they really? Upbringing would likely play a factor, wouldn't it? Imagine this scenario. Your uncle has your father murdered, or at least you're pretty sure he murdered him. Your mother and her friends are almost certain that he is guilty. Most of the population is also pretty suspicious. Your father was very popular, after all, so his death raises more than one eyebrow, especially him being so young. Your uncle and father had been feuding for many years before he suddenly took ill and died. Bad timing, perhaps. Years later, your uncle banishes your mother and your brother into exile. When they are safely out of view, they are both disposed of in due course. At a young age, you were sent to live with this monster, your uncle, in his home, under his watch and care. Perhaps we can start to see the paranoia, the cruelty that began to grow in the heart of Caligula. For 6 years he would live on Capri with his uncle Tiberius, the Emperor of Rome. Here he would witness acts of barbarism that would leave a lasting mark on his soul. It was said of Caligula that never was there a better servant or worse master. Caligula knew how to play the game. His very survival in the shadow of Tiberius spoke volumes on his willpower and self-control. To live so close to the man who had taken so much from you must have taken the patience of a saint or a madman. It was said that Caligula had taken a dagger into the room of his vile master, intent on ending his wretched existence, that Tiberius had seen him with the weapon as he dropped it to the floor. Tiberius had done nothing about this, never speaking of it again. This story is one of many that Caligula liked to tell of his time on Capri. Yeah, right. There were rumors, of course, that Caligula had finally smothered his uncle to death to help speed along his illness. Maybe. Hard to say, really. He most certainly had motive. But Tiberius did finally shuffle off the mortal coil, and when he did so, he generously left his estate and empire to Caligula and his own grandson, Gemellus, to share. Caligula was not the sharing kind, and poor Gemellus didn't really stand much of a chance, given his youth and inexperience. Caligula had this little road bump dealt with quickly, before seizing power. Gemellus would survive, however, disenfranchised yet alive, nevertheless. At least for now. The people rejoiced at the ascension of their new emperor. A child of the very popular Germanicus and Agrippina was most welcome to lead them into their bright new future. For most of his entire reign, the common people would feel just like this. It was the regular people who loved Caligula, toasted his long and happy rule. The elite, the senatorial order, however, would live in his closest circle. It would be them who bore the wrath of his madness. Not yet, however. In the first portion of his reign, Caligula seemed prudent. He passed laws and even abandoned Tiberius's dreaded treason trials, even going so far as to destroy all the papers from the proceedings. He granted bonuses to his Praetorian Guard and the military. He put on spectacular games for the people, helped alleviate the tax burden for some, and banished criminals and deviants from the city. He even honored his dead family, seeing to their proper burials. The people called him our star, and they loved their new young emperor. Things were going great for Rome. And then Caligula got sick. Really, really sick. Many people believe that he had been poisoned. He recovered from his illness a changed man, and not at all in a good way. Something in him was now broken completely. He began to kill and exile even people he had considered close to him for many years. Gemellus met a violent end at this point, much to the fury of their shared grandmother. Some say she took her own life, but others believe that Caligula saw to her disposal. The train started to come off the tracks, and nobody was safe in this new, cruel reality. He only kept his uncle Claudius alive to mock at him, gloating at him often and his disabilities. He eliminated his father-in-law and exiled his 2 younger sisters after his favorite sister, Julia Drusilla, died. There had been rumors of a love affair between the 2 of them before she had passed. Executing people without trial was commonplace during the rule of Caligula. His terrible mismanagement eventually led to a brief famine. Suetonius claimed that Caligula had once been told he had no more chance of becoming emperor than riding a horse across the Gulf of Baiae. Now, as emperor, he decided to do this impossible task, because he could. Seizing the boats to build a long pontoon bridge, he did in fact cross the bay by horseback. Certainly, we can imagine he felt pretty proud of himself in that moment. The lack of boats, however, had either caused or contributed to the starvation of his own people, according to the very same account, exacerbating or creating a famine which killed many. He ordered an aborted campaign to conquer Britain before finally stopping short and ordering his legions to gather seashells on the shores of the English Channel to commemorate his victory over the sea god Neptune. Collectible, surely, to mark such a momentous moment in history. The Romans loved to deify people after they died. It was pretty common since the death of Caesar to do this after they had passed on. Caligula figured, why not be a living god instead? Always an innovator, Caligula encouraged the people to celebrate his godhood whenever they could. He insisted, of course. But then he figured, since I am in fact a god, I really need to make the people of the East, especially those pesky Jews in Jerusalem, know that I am serious about it. He ordered a statue of himself to be built in the Temple of Jerusalem. Obviously, the Jews would have been outraged by this affront to their monotheistic faith. The wise governor of Syria at the time decided to drag his feet, delaying the construction for over a year to stave off war in the region. A decision which likely saved many lives on both sides. Thankfully, the statue was never built. Self-absorbed with a wicked temper, Caligula spent money on massive overindulgences. One of his favorite pastimes was to invite powerful and leading families to dinner. He would then escort another man's wife from the dinner room, engage in relations, before returning to brag about the entire sordid business in front of the man and his wife and the rest of the guests. They could do nothing but laugh at their humiliation, or pay the ultimate price for their outrage. Their lives hung by a thread. Nobody was free from this fear. Nobody. During the games in the arena, Caligula ordered his guards to throw an entire section of the audience into the arena during the intermission to be eaten by wild animals. The prisoners had run out, and he was bored. Thankfully, this never happened. Most famously, he threatened to make his horse the consul of Rome, the sign of the delusion and the contempt he held for this sacred office and the men who held it. Several conspiracies failed to destroy the mad emperor in his reign. When Caligula announced that he would abandon the city, move the capital to Egypt, and rule as a living god, things began to unravel quickly. It was at this point that the Praetorians became involved, actively, knowing that it was time for their cruel master to go. Cassius Syria had been a Praetorian for years. Caligula had openly mocked him for much of that time, calling him effeminate due to his weak voice and hurling daily insults at the man. Safe to say that it did not take much for the conspirators to choose him as the lead assassin. Syria and his accomplices took turns stabbing the mad tyrant over 30 times. He may have been a god, but he was no longer a living one by any stretch of the imagination. They had seen to that. By the time the most loyal guards to Caligula had responded to aid their master, it was over. He was only 28 years old, spending less than 4 blood-soaked years as emperor. Well, that will do it for the first episode of the Lunatic series. Please click the subscription button and comment below. Like the video and hit that notification icon to be kept in the loop on future episodes. Thanks for watching.